Welcome to the Top 200 Podcast with your host, Herschel Ford.
What's up, everybody? This is Herschel Ford from High School Top 200, and welcome everybody to the Monday Morning Meeting Podcast. It's good to have another week. It's good to have another set of games that we all enjoyed, I guess, in the weekend, I guess, depending if you won or lost. Congratulations to those that won. For those that lost, if you're year 13, you now got a different stage in life. If you're year 12 and year 11, now it's time to, I guess, restructure all your goals and work on next year and get yourself ready for next year. Because, at least you got another chance to wear the crest again on your chest for your team and for, I guess, the school that you've been attending and you got emotional ties to, all that kind of stuff. But it's been a good week. It's been a good rugby week. I guess, learning as well. As you all know, I went down to Hastings to watch that Hastings and Napier one. I didn't really have. I didn't really pick anyone to win. I was just going down just to watch the game, and going down because I thought that was going to be the better game. Actually, all the games turned out pretty close. I think St. Bede's and Nelson College was the only one that wasn't close. But every other game was close this week. And I've watched every game. The only one I didn't watch was the Fielding Silver Street one. I'm going to get the footage, but I haven't actually watched that one this week. Just read a bunch of reports and stuff, and so watching the Hastings and Napier game, and I guess the overall feeling that I got from it, was that I felt like Hastings. Oh no, I didn't feel like it. No, this is exactly what it was. Hastings had a really good first half. They had a really good first half where they dominated most of the possession of the ball, but also the territory in which they attacked. And one thing I want to mention before I mention the game, Hastings have got to fix their field. If they're going to be this good and they're going to be consistently at a top level, they've got to fix their field. There was this patch of, I think you'd see it in the highlights too, and the midfield was just standing in this big puddle of water, and it looked like it was almost 10 meters wide. That's how big the thing, I was thinking, jeepers, I don't know. I feel like that if you're going to have a really good rugby team and a really good first team program, you should have a really good field. I know that Hastings boys is kind of new to being on top of the game. They've had 5 years, I guess, of success. 6 years success at the top of the game. Hopefully they get their field sorted. Nelson College is the same. Palmy boys is the same. They all got to get their fields done properly as well. And even St. Paul's College in Auckland, who are new to the game, have had a really good win on Saturday too. They're probably another one that needs to fix up their fields, because I've been to their fields, and having that prestigious of a league team as well as coming into rugby now, they should probably get a new field, because it's not only terrible getting to their field, but once you see them play on their field when it's muddy, it's the worst. Along with Palmy and that, it's just so bad. But anyways, Hastings had the position, most of the position in the field territory as well, and they were playing in the right end of the field, which was Napier's half, and they played a lot of their game within that 30 meters into the try line, and they did a lot with running in the forwards, being brutally physical up front, and really just dominating the rucks. And there were times of possession where they had something like 7 or 8 phases, like 2 or 3 sets of 7, 8 phases where it was always almost like Napier had to do something to stop that momentum and stop it before it started getting worse in 8 phases, 9 phases onward, because Hastings were just so violent in their hits, and their cleaning out of the breakdown was so good. And then Jamal was getting the ball out really fast. Tully at second 5 was making these breaks, but also bringing it back into the forwards there, so that there wasn't so much of the forwards chasing the ball around. It was always kind of there and available, and quick enough for them and close enough for them to start building momentum off the backs play. Bryce had a really good game from fullback as well, where he also brought it back towards the forwards and brought it back towards support, and made sure that even if he was tackled early, there wasn't a chance that there would be turnovers and stuff like that, because I think those Hastings boys lot had a really good game in terms of keeping that ball security, nice and tight. And I think that was like one of those things that I think Hastings did really well, was that even though the way that they retained the ball and got position and field position in that, I felt like the way that they were doing it was there was a lot of structure to the game, because you had guys like Tom Allen and even Josh Leach. Oscar was another one as well, where all these boys really put their bodies on the line and all took turns hitting the ball up and stuff like that. Victor was another one as well, DeVito, along with A1. These guys all had these strong games where in that first half their momentum was really positive momentum, all in the right direction, all straight ahead and backed up by a good midfield with Tully and Hitter. So it didn't seem like the game was all played in just one place. It was really spread out, but also supported by the other auxiliaries that were on the field as well. And that was the first half. And Napier did really struggle. They had an injury early on, and then Adam Curran came in, who ended up scoring a try. But they had an injury in the midfield. I think that was kind of another one where it, even with the backs of Hastings, where they had the winger, what was his name? I can't even remember what his name was. But he got injured, and then it ended up being Bryson Telfer and then Sean McNaughton, who's a blindside, number 8. He ended up out on the wing based on just the injury problem. They had to get someone out there, so he ended up playing on the wing. I mean, I don't think he'd ever thought that he'd be playing on the wing for Hastings boys, but I guess when you're in those situations, you kind of just have to. But he ended up being out there, and then you could kind of see the dynamic of it change. And the good thing I think about Hastings is that even though they had that problem and Napier were struggling really to keep up with their pace, they had someone like Kobe Deacon in Hastings' side who were really testing the Napier back three with his kicking and trying to get it into down into the corners, forcing them to run back, forcing them to make decisions, and forcing Napier to really play a game that they kind of didn't really want to play. And Napier did really well for a while towards the end of that first half. But in the beginning of it, they really struggled, and it seemed like Hastings were really going to run away with this game, and it was strange because as they scored the first 2 points, the first 2 tries, they were all pressured ones, and then you kind of like looked at it and thought, oh, flip, this is going to be really bad for Napier boys. And even though Napier had their time with the ball and getting even down to onto the line, and they were bashing for a little bit on the line, Hastings were surviving and then slowly pushing them back after that, and it kind of didn't look like they were in serious position to score, or they didn't look like they got into that position where they wanted to score, but it looked like they didn't know how they wanted to do it. And that failed direction to me was kind of what their problem was in that first half. Then in the second half, it was almost like a big switch around, because Napier then started controlling it in the forwards, and then Napier really put it to them and made them work and really tired out that forward pack of Hastings boys by not like physically bashing them, but making them work. Like every position that they had, it was so meaningful to Napier in the way that they did it. And you know, I really give it up to Max and Gus, and Tasman had a really good game. You know, I thought that Jared Martin was solid as well, and what's his name? The Locks as well all had really good games, and they all did it as a pack. And it wasn't like pretty stuff. It was just grinded out, and really made Hastings really dig deep. And then they got the yellow card that I guess Napier was pushing for, and the ref had no choice but to give it, you know. And then once they got that yellow card, Hastings got the yellow card, they just pushed through and just did the same thing and just kept bashing in the forwards, and pretty much got the game back on track, you know, from there on. A game of 2 halves is kind of how you describe it, but there were times where Hastings almost got out of it in that second half. I thought there were reads that they could have done that were a bit different. Even though Tully had a lot of control in that backline, I think they did miss the fact that they had that other option, that they didn't have that other option as of a winger, because Kyle Lambert, I think, was the kid that got injured on the wing, and then Sean had to come in, and there were like actually a couple of breaks down that side where Sean did get the ball and did make those meters on the outside, but as a blindside making that break to a winger making that break is a big difference. There's a big difference between that those kind of dynamics. And so it was almost like the backs wanted to run plays, but they knew that it wasn't going to be quite complete, because there they have, I guess, a guy who's not a winger out there trying to do his best, and by default just had to be there. So I give it up to them. I give it up to Hastings and how they played, and what they how they played, and just what they tried to do. I understand how they tried to their game plan and what they wanted to do, but it just, on the day, you still just have to work it out and try and get there, and rugby just ends up that way. Rugby just becomes that kind of game where everything could change within a couple of minutes. Just 5 minutes of halftime, get back on the field, and it just doesn't look like, you just don't look like the same team. You just don't have that same feeling, and that's kind of what it looked like with Hastings boys, is that the feeling just wasn't there anymore. The feeling and the intensity that they had in that first half just wasn't there, and then Napier boys finally woke up, and they finally started getting momentum. Really started bashing it up in the forwards. Angus had a really good game. I really liked what he did. when he got on the field, and even when his brother George got on the field too, I thought that he had a solid game towards the end. Who's the other guy? Cade Barham was the other kid that I liked at lock too. He had a really, really good game. Stole the line out in a real crucial time for them in that second half where Hastings was getting that momentum. They finally had this position, and yeah, he just went up quick, got on the ball, got to the air quicker, sort of snatched it out and got the ball out straight away. Juwan had a good game too. Juwan Ross, or was it Tyron Crystal? Oh, one of those two boys. The hooker anyway, he had a solid game too. Good carries, big, effective carries. And I thought for a game that was so messy, there wasn't a lot of mistakes. I actually think, and I've noticed it too, like, even when it's wet, like not a lot of mistakes come from high school, from first team for first team rugby. Not a lot of mistakes. The boys have got pretty good. They got a pretty good handle on when it comes to that kind of I guess wet weather rugby. Sometimes they drop more balls in like dry games than they do the wet games. But I didn't think it was bad yesterday. Even in the back line where you had Joel Russell and also Corey Burkett trying to run things at 9 and 10, because also CJ Mini also had a really good game at second 5, and I think that they didn't really go past second 5 really, and because if you looked at their midfield, they weren't too big at all. They weren't a big midfield. But CJ's a hard runner for how small the guy is. Coming over from Taupo Nuiatea last year over to the First 15 and Napier Boys this year, and that's a big step up. And he's actually really played really well this year. Coming in, and he's made a whole, he started on the wing earlier this year, made himself into a second 5 and really played well. And him and Josh Augustine, who will also be back next year along with Joel Russell. Even Josh had a big game in terms of saving them in that first half too. Josh got a few good runs out of their half and pretty much saved them in getting trapped, and just the style of game, his run game is just on point. I can't wait to see what they look like next year. But congrats to Napier Boys and just that hard fight that they had just to get out of there, just to come from behind and win within that second half. And I guess in that dramatic Hastings Boys and Napier Boys fashion, it was just such a good game to go to, and it was worth the trip. I had my 2 little assistants with me, and we went swimming after just to pay them off for putting up with me, and then keeping me awake on the ride home too. But yeah, it was a great game, and it's going to be interesting to see what happens next week when Silverstream and Napier, get into it too. If it's in Napier, I might make that trip again, to be honest. Always got to check the funds and see what the wife's up to, but I might make that trip again to go see Silverstream and Napier if it's in Napier. If it's in Wellington, I don't know. That's a long trip for just one game and one night. Having watched the other games, obviously I was keeping track of everything else. Like the Nelson and then the St. Bede's game, the score being so big really was just down to Nelisone. Malolo was probably the biggest factor of that game, and I don't know if St. Bede's did this on purpose, but they had been O'Donovan at second 5 marking him. Now I don't know what their depth is like with St. Bede's. Like, I do know some of the guys, and when you have a guy like Nelisone, you pretty much have to have the best midfielders in the country to sort of match up with him. And even with being out there, he was always going to do his best, but I don't think that he was going to beat him or even match him. I think that was a hard task for them to put him in. But if it was me, I would have just left Ben at halfback and then just got someone else to do the job, and just have Ben playing at his best at halfback and leading that forward pack around. I kind of feel like Nelisone was going to do whatever he was going to do regardless of who was kind of in front of him. And even though he did open up the game, there were still other factors in it. Like, obviously, Timmy was there too. Soida at centre, who also had a massive game. Fletcher Hewitt had a massive game. I thought he was really good. I still like Harrison Inch at first 5, the year 11 first 5, who doesn't try to do too much. Obviously, because he has Tyler Blake at 9, and then Nelisone outside of him, he knows exactly what his part is, and that's pretty much pass it to your superstars and let them do the deed. And St. Bede started off right, and they started off, close with Tanner and Christian, having good games. What's his name? Gunn was having a good game too. And the forward pack stayed up with them. Even Andre Sula as well. Sula was having a good game, and they were playing together, playing solid. And it just seemed like once it got to the backs, they just didn't have anything. Like Cam Rowling, who I like a lot, it was like he was uncomfortable. Maybe that's more credited to what Nelson was doing, but it kind of looked like he was uncomfortable. Kind of looked like he wasn't, he wasn't getting the space and the opportunities that he's used to. Because Cam from fullback is such a good player, and always makes really good decisions. But it just felt like they were off. It just felt like St. Bede's was off in their back line. Even Flynn Bainbridge, who was at first 5, obviously they needed Jermaine, who wasn't there. But I still think that they should have, Riley Lucas as well. I still think St. Bede's should have just went with, Ben at 9 and made sure he controlled it from there, and then just sort of found other ways to do it. I really felt sorry for Ben and what he had to try and do in a position that he's not his best at, because his best position is 9. But he was just put there just to make it work. And I guess that's the pressure that you have on your best players in your team, is that you kind of need them to play their best wherever you put them. And it's not really an option of we don't need you to play a good game, we need you to play a great game. And if he was playing up against anybody that was just, your normal average second 5 and first 15 rugby, then he'll be fine. But not when it's someone like Nelisone. And so, Nelisone scoring 3 tries. Obviously, the only, bad thing about Nelson was probably their line-out throwing, but, he knows that. He knows that it's, that he needs to work on that for next week, and especially against someone like John McGlashan, it's just not gonna go over well. But guys like Muffy and that, they all had really good games. He was always just really, really good just running the ball. He had a lot of opportunities in that game that he took, and then he made meters that were meaningful and that actually helped his side. They weren't just like ones where you kind of just run and there's nothing to it. There was always Jordan Smith there, but Sione Muffy, whenever he ran the ball, and I think there was one time where he got stripped and the other one he got knocked on the ball, even in those moments that those things happened, it was like the psychological side of it, where he was like, yeah, I can break the line whenever I want to. I can, find my offloads and things like that. And so that's what I really liked about it in that game, because then you still had Devontae Meredith, you still had Henny Fa'avai as well. Hamilpore is such a good player too. Him and Matt Lone and Dane Lapine. All these guys had really, really solid games. And then even with the year 11s coming on towards the end of the game, that held sort of that structure with Tane and Salmaki as well. I think that it's really going to help them in this next matchup, because even though Christian and Tanner, who had solid running games, and as much as good as Tanner is, it was after the tackles and then the way that Nelson was cutting off those extra offloads, those quick rucks that were going on. Nelson were the ones that were doing all of that. And then the scrum on the other side of it was just St. Bede's just didn't really have an answer for that scrum as well. And so that's what I'm going to be looking forward to when it comes to the John McGlashan game, is that if all these things come together, and they're going to need all of it to come together 2 weeks in a row, Nelson could be going back to the top 4 again. And it's funny too, because Nelson, even in my rankings, because this team is really new. If you saw their team from last year to the team that they have this year, is completely different. A lot of those boys left from last year. A lot of them left, and so for them to have this new group in there, and a lot of them really young, not a lot of experience, for them to turn it around really does give a lot of legitimacy to the rugby program that they have there, and the rugby program that's the academy that they're growing there and that they're working on, is that all these guys are coming through. Like, even when you look at guys like Tane and Salmaki and Harrison and Zion, all these year 11s that are there and that do get legitimate time on the field as well, and a couple of them starting. That's a great indication for what they're going to be like next year when some of these fellas, have to leave. And so, I guess if you want to be part of a big program right now and a part of a good academy, you got to look at places like Nelson who have really worked on it and within the last 6 years, and they're getting the real results of how good these players are turning out once they get to first 15 level and then on into the next. It's a pretty good indication, and that this academy is working for this area. And then obviously Tasman get a big deal of players from Nelson and Melbourne, and obviously it's paying off. I felt sorry for St. Bede's a bit. The game just got out of hand, and there was nothing really that they could do. It was just so one-sided after the first half, and they couldn't score, in the second half quick enough to sort of, stop that momentum and maybe give themselves a break and a bit more confidence and all that kind of stuff. And so, it was pretty sad, seeing the way that the game ended. But I guess that's just the way it is. They got to the finals. Maybe maybe just the worst game that they played for the finals, to be honest. And I don't want to be a dick, but I'm just trying to be honest and with how I've seen them play throughout this whole year. And I've probably seen like 9 of the games this year. I've seen a whole bunch of St. Bede's games, and so if you were to go and watch them, you wouldn't say this was one of their best games. And maybe the season is long, maybe, because guys from the Miles Toyota Cup, they have such a long season, but I mean, I guess just how it is, just how it is. The 1A final was another game that went down to the wire. Went down to the last second no try in the corner, gutting way to finish, all that kind of stuff. But that's just the way that the rugby is, I feel for. I guess I feel for any team that finishes the season that way, and finishes with such a close game and such a close finish. Especially when you've gone perfect throughout the season within your competition. St. Peter's only had one loss, and that was to St. Bede's when they went down for their traditional. And so for them, it was a hard one to sort of swallow, and you got to feel sorry for the boys and feel for them with this loss. But at the same time, you got to praise Custom boys and what they were able to accomplish, and they played good. Like St. Peter's had that early penalty. Itu was always going to be the guy that they went to at halfback. He was always going to be the guy that controlled it. Blair played massive as well at number 8 for St. Peter's. But in terms of that first half, they didn't really extend past those two players in terms of having that meaningful effect on the game. And for such a mean front row that they have in that first half, I have to admit they weren't as productive as I'm used to seeing those St. Peter's boys play, especially in that front row. I don't know why it was kind of like that. Even when I was watching the game, it was kind of... Because Kelson boys had cleaner rucks, they were so quick, and the boys were so supportive of every single runner, and they weren't wasting players at the breakdown. There was always only like 2 guys cleaning out, and they would clean out so good that, Cole was there right away, just cleaning out the ball. Regan was there at first 5, guiding it around, and then they always went to Xavier, who was there as the second option. But he's such an important second option, Xavier, and he was just finding small little gaps and openings, faking them out with, little fake passes, stepping into gaps, had his little hezzy on the outside, cutting up some of that backline where he was making these gaps, making these little breaks, and then finding guys on the inside. Sammy and that on the wings, they had good games as well. And because of these quick rucks and these and stringing these phases together, after that St. Peter's was up by 10 points already, Kelston then kind of took over. Joel had a massive game as well in the front row. Joel, Xavier, the loose trio for Kelston boys they did a lot of work. Jarrell and what's his name, Tui Tupo were the other ones, in that loose trio that I thought were really good and had a really high work rate, which really showed, I guess, the strength of that forward pack. And they were always involved, they were always doing something, and because those rucks were so fast and they were getting the ball out so clean, it just looked like St. Peter's just couldn't regroup fast enough in that first half. And I think that there was maybe one try that I think Kelston probably missed out on that they could have gotten. Probably that one on occasion that I thought that they could have gotten, but Regan Brown had such a mean game, and he saved his best game for the finals too. Like, saved it at the right time. Him and Cole Benson at 9 to 10 had almost like the perfect game, and they were able to use everybody. And I sort of felt sorry for Etu on the other side of St. Peter's, that it felt like he was not trying to do too much, but was given too much also at the same time. Like, he was in everything that they did. He was in everything that they did. And so there was like no time where he sort of had that little break to take a breath. Where Xavier on the other side had Regan playing so well and Cole playing so well and had that forward pack playing so well that Xavier could take that breath to sort of look and assess what he wanted to do, where Etu was, getting the ball out, making tackles, doing box kicks, kicking downfield, kicking for line, all these things that he was trying to do. And I honestly don't care who you are. To me, that's just too much just for one player to do. And for a team just to rely on one player to make a difference that much and expect him to do it for the full game without mistakes. And it's kind of like basketball, where you have like the best player having the most turnovers. It's like, yeah, because he has the ball most of the time. Etu was kind of like that, where he's the best player, but probably made the most mistakes because he had the ball most of the time. He's always going to make the most mistakes if he has the ball most of the time. It's just the percentage of it. It's just how it is. But I thought he was given too much responsibility in that game, too much He had too much effect on it where he wasn't able to get his little rest in when he could, like I've seen him have in other games. Maybe you can attribute that to Kelston boys putting a lot of pressure on him, making sure that they're cutting all the rest of the opportunities out, cutting off all those passing lanes where he has to do something. But I just felt sorry for him in that game because it fell on him a lot, especially within that first half. The second half, that forward pack started to sort of wake up. That front row woke up in that second half. And then they started playing the way that I was used to them seeing them playing, and Josh also woke up. Pataya was also there, and I thought that if they kept it in the forwards in the second half, like they did in the second half, they did that in the first half and sort of tired them out. I think we would have had a different game, and it probably would have been a little bit of a blowout to St. Peter's if they did it that way. I mean, you sort of give it up to Kelston, who played with the sun sort of right in the eyes in that first half, and they did great with that situation. So I thought that was pretty. There was a lot of them for that, and I thought St. Peter's were going to sort of capitalize on that, and I think they, in a way, tried to. But, Kelston just played their way out of it. Maybe if they, I guess in hindsight, if they played that tight forward game that they were playing in that second half, maybe more would have come out of it, but that's kind of just neither here or there because it's already happened. But Kelston and now got to go and play Westlake Boys, which is not going to be an easy game because Westlake Boys haven't lost this year within their competition, and they're right in there in sort of that mode of winning. And I know like people look down on the North Harbour competition, but Westlake Boys have been consistent, and I feel like this is going to be a tough one for Kelston to get out of. If they're not ready. The Hamilton Boys and Tauranga Boys game was kind of the same in terms of like that forward pack for Tauranga Boys is pretty underrated. Like even for someone like myself who has watched all their games this year, or maybe I've missed like 2 games. I think I've missed of theirs this year in terms of watching their games. And it's interesting too because Tauranga, and I was talking about it with somebody else too, but Tauranga beat John McGlashan in the preseason, and John McGlashan won, the Otago competition. On that same trip, in the next game after John McGlashan on the tour that Tauranga Boys did, they beat Nelson College, who has also won the Myers Toyota Cup. They've also drew with the 1A Championships, Kelston Boys 26-all, just in these past holidays. They beat Rotorua Boys, who and won the Moeska Cup off them to advance. And Tauranga Boys have probably got a case for themselves for being a top 5 school with a resume like that. And they do have their dark spots on their resume as well. But they're obviously a team. They're obviously a team that is probably should be talked about more, especially that forward pack that they had, because what they did to Hamilton on Saturday, especially in that second half, kind of puts doubt in my mind about Hamilton boys and what their forward pack can do. Or maybe it's just a testament to how Tauranga boys did. Because I mean, like, when they played in the Super 8, Tauranga boys would just run off the field. And I feel like in that first game, they got intimidated even before they started the game. And then Hamilton just, pretty much suffocated every single opportunity that they had and blew them out. The way that it was on Saturday was not like that at all. And Tauranga boys met them at every, pretty much at every sort of attack. Even when Hamilton boys was up, what was it, like 17-0 in the first half, Tauranga boys weren't quite out of it. Because once that second half started, then Tauranga boys just came with that forward pack and just really did manhandle Hamilton boys, and they kind of didn't have an answer for them. And I know this is probably not going to be a pleasant conversation that the coaches are going to have with that forward pack, but they really need to do something before the top four. Because having those turnaround games, especially on the Friday and the Sunday, is not going to be easy. And if you're going to be beat up in the forwards, kind of like how Tauranga did to Hamilton boys, in such a big way, it's not going to be pretty at all for them. It's not going to be, it's not going to be a good show for them, because whether it's Nelson or John McGlashan that come through, both of them have massive forward packs. Napier, we know, have a massive forward pack. Carlson have a really big forward pack that is high work rate. You look at Silverstream, who have a solid scrum as well, probably one of the better scrums, due to Sinelia being in there as their props. And then you got Solomona as well, with Seal, like guys like that. Then you've got Westlake boys, who have also got some big boys in their forward pack, and so if Hamilton have got to, if they want to advance, depending on who they play or what side of they play on, is that they just got to get their forward pack right. I know that they're going to go through a lot of stuff, and they're going to have to play New Plymouth boys next week, but hopefully they sort it out. Because if they don't, they're probably going to lose in that first game of the top four if they make it through. If they can't even get past New Plymouth boys, it's not going to be a good thing. And Tauranga really showed them up, and that's maybe going to be a game that all these other guys should watch, just in case they play them. The backline was fine. I felt like the backline was fine, but everyone pretty much went to sleep in that second half. The forward pack went to sleep in the second half. Not even Ollie Mathis was having a better game. Liam's weren't having a good game. Tama Hodgson, who I really liked, in the second half, these guys did not have that good of a game in the second half. The scrum started going backwards, and the yellow card didn't help either. How they're going to fix it, I don't know. I know that Greg will have some kind of he'll take them through something, show them on film, all that kind of stuff. What they do, what Hamilton boys do, but they've got to fix that up. Tauranga boys probably showed them what their weaknesses were. Maybe that's a good thing, but in that game it just wasn't. It just wasn't good to see from them in the second half, where Hamilton boys usually control the game by the second half and usually run people off their feet. Just didn't happen that way. And Tauranga was so It was almost like Tauranga got comfortable with bashing them around. Their forward pack was too strong. Obviously, Ruben Palmer was playing, doing what he does. Hopefully he gets a New Zealand rep, call up with its Barbarians or New Zealand secondary schools. Hammond had a good game. Sam Dyer, one of the best line-out jumpers in New Zealand, I reckon, was also there. That had a really good game too. Obviously, the front row for Tauranga boys had a really good game. So it's sad to see the way that they lost and how it came. But that's just another one. It's just how rugby is. It was kind of like New Plymouth. New Plymouth, I was kind of gutted at that. Pukekohe have done great this year. Pukekohe have done, way better than what I guess anyone thought they were going to do. Daniel Fourier, Cole, Colmer, here's another one. Cody Wilson, Liam Guilford, guys like that, Liam Gregor at first five, all these fellas that are part of this team have had really good seasons. Ezekiel, Hortai from last year, him and Liam Dowell as well, who have all come back from last year's midfield and have been part of that backline. They knew what it was like last year because they had a good season last year. And, a real good real big ups to those fellas for how far they've come. But at the same time, New Plymouth boys did not do themselves any kind of favours with their games, keep, staying that close. And they almost got tripped up. And it shouldn't have been that way. I felt like New Plymouth boys took it too easy and thought that they were going to be easy beats. And then Pukekohe just ran it back at them like nothing. And it was kind of like New Plymouth weren't ready for that. They weren't expecting that. And they were lucky. They were actually pretty lucky to get out of that. So hopefully they do better, this coming week against Hamilton boys. And even though both of the winners didn't really have good games, hopefully they sort it out before next week, because one of them is going to be going home early. And, both of them don't want to be that team, but hopefully they work it out. Like I said, I haven't seen the Fielding game and Silverstream game yet, and so I'll get it soon. But it was a surprise. I didn't think Silverstream would have it in them. But Fielding, maybe that week off just wasn't good for them. Or maybe that Silverstream is just a better side than I thought they were. That could be the other thing. They have really good players anyway. It's not like they don't have good players. Because we know how good Silverstream can be. But yeah, it's just they're just in that competition where you just sort of don't have a lot of. I don't want to be a dick about it, but a lot of people have lost the respect for Wellington rugby as a whole over the past maybe 7 years now. I know Super 8 teams that don't really go there with the expectation that they're going to have these good hard games anymore, like I guess it was back in the days. And so, you sort of start to think, well, I know that sometimes people think, why should we play them? And these crossover traditional games, if they're not going to be good. And the only one that's been consistently good, to be honest, is Silverstream. And they're good right through from under 14s all the way up. And you have guys like Scots College who are really good at first 15, but in the other grades, not so much sometimes. It's not like a hard-out rugby culture from the bottom up like there is at Silverstream. And Silverstream has maybe the most consistency out of actually most teams in the country. Sacred Heart's kind of like that too. Hamilton boys, Christchurch boys, they have strong teams all the way from under 14s all the way up, and Silverstream are kind of like that. They just don't have the greatest competition throughout the year. And so when they lose a game like they did to St. Pat's Town, you kind of start to question them because of the competition that they're playing. And that's just me, because I watch everybody and watch everything that I can and sort of know the difference between what competition people are playing at and where their competition lies sort of in the rankings of competition. So Silverstream beating Fielding was a surprise, but once I see it, then I'll know, kind of why, exactly why that kind of happened.
Push up, Rugby! Hold on! Hang on, Stephen! Boxy! Boxy! Score it! Boxy, go! Touch! Touch! Pressure, Nanja! It was touched though! Touched! It was touched! Forward, Nanja! Forward! Watch here, Josh.
Another one that I want to mention and talk about was the 1B final, and because St. Paul's College in Auckland, which is like a league school, and everyone only knows them as a league school, but they won yesterday against McLean's. I don't know how they're going to do it this year, but I know that there is going to be a relegation, and St. Paul's College to me is going to be, I guess, that team that everyone sort of has to watch out for. And the reason why I say that is that for the longest time they've just been a league school. They have been playing rugby, but they just play it out of fitness, and they don't really concentrate that much on it. They don't really care too much for it at all. They just play because they needed games and they wanted to sort of, work on their players, all that kind of stuff. But the last 2 years, they've actually changed the situation of the league program, and they have like a rugby mindset to it. Now, the way that I kind of think about it is that even though you're a league school, if you have a chance to have all your league players playing in the 1A, consistently stay in the 1A, playing against 1A talent, your league boys they're only going to benefit from it. Even though they're not playing the code that they love, they're going to be sharpened a lot more once they get to the NRL after, the 1A. And we all know that, and obviously if you've been following our page, is that there's so many Fresh 15 boys that are all league players that are signed with NRL clubs and that have stayed in Fresh 15 rugby. Not because they wanted to stay, but because NRL clubs are saying to them, oh, you're playing Fresh 15 rugby in New Zealand, stay there. You don't need to come over. That's good enough as it is. You get a lot more better games and better talent in Fresh 15 rugby in New Zealand than coming over to Australia. You might as well just stay there and just play that because the standard is so high anyway. Now what St. Paul's is doing is that they're trying to get their boys into the 1A, which I reckon they will next year. And if this is going to benefit their league boys when they leave school, if they can consistently stay within the 1A, if I was a league player, I would go to St. Paul's. Just based off that I don't have to play in the 1B. I can play against 1A talent. I can play against all the boys that from other schools. All the Carlson boys that are all league players. All the St. Killigan's boys that are league players, King's boys that are league players. All the St. Peter's boys that are league players, and they're all signed with NRL contracts, but they're all just playing Fresh 15 rugby. And you go, well, I can at least. If you guys can do it, at least I can do it, but I can do it from St. Paul's, which is a league school. Still play league on, I guess, the Wednesdays or whenever they play their league, but also still play against the best talent. Because I know, and I'm not trying to pick on league, but I know that when the league boys play in that league competition, there's too much of a talent difference between those players that are playing league and those players that are playing rugby, because most of those top players go to rugby because it's just better for them in terms of talent. And that's just something that is, I guess, best for the individual, because they're trying to get ready to play in the NRL. So it's best for them just to play in the Fresh 15 rather than play in the Fresh 13, where the competition is not always going to be good and the games are not always going to be good. So what St. Paul's is doing is really important for the growth of their players when they do leave Fresh 15 rugby, then go to the NRL, and they'll be more prepared. They've got guys like Josiah Tanoa, who's a hooker who used to be a midfielder, transitioned to hooker this year in rugby, and probably arguably one of the better hookers, but we don't actually get to see him because they're in the 1B. Another different problem that I've been talking about is that there should be more exposure of rugby games, but it's just one of those things where people just don't want to do it. AJ Jones, who's the number 8, who people have told me that it would actually be one of the better number 8s in the country if he had been seen a lot more. And after going onto their IG page that they have, and just watching all of their all the big highlight reels that they have on there, this dude is really good. He really is really good. And I wish I went out and saw one of their games. I had it marked down a couple of times and ended up going to sort of other games. One was a protest that happened. I couldn't get to the game, but I really should have went out there and watched a full game of theirs. And I've seen them online. I've seen them from other schools recordings, but it's always better just to go and see them in person. I should have went and done it in person. But with those guys coming, those guys this year, and the way that they played, winning that competition, getting a chance to go into the first one, the best thing about it is that they have something like 14 players coming back next year. There's about 10 year 12s and 4 year 11s. And obviously the best year 12 that's coming back for them next year is probably Seal Cully, who I think New Zealand Rugby have to look out for, because I think that he's a New Zealand secondary school caliber winger. And after seeing him in sevens last year, seeing clips of him this year, and what I think that he'll be like next year, he'll probably be one of the players that New Zealand secondary schools should watch out for. I don't think they will, because that's just New Zealand secondary schools. But that's a name that I would look out for next year, because he's going to be one of the better wingers that are going to be back, and a guy that they would probably need to look out for. Now, whether he plays New Zealand secondary schools, I don't know, because he might just want to, stay with league. What's his name? Quinnen Mafoy, him and Shemaya Footy. Let's see if I got his name right. Yeah, Shemaya Footy. That's the 9 and 10 from starting from this year. Are both going to be back next year. Jericho Talisao is going to be back. Who will probably most likely be in the midfield with Ainga. Ani Terere, I think his name is. He'll probably be the other one. Noah Hetutu Davis, the year 11 hooker, who's also had a big year. He'll probably be another one that everyone should watch out for next year. Waka Tate is another one, and the loose forward too. But all these guys are all going to be back, and I think they just need to look out for St. Peter's, St. Paul's. They just need to look out for St. Paul's. And don't expect like big, massive things for them in the first year of getting to the 1A, because there is always like there's a feeling out point with the 1A, and because there is quite a big gap in terms of the top 1B teams and the top 1A teams. Especially this year, I think St. Paul's can beat Liston, Aotearoa, Tangaroa College, come close to Dilworth, come close to Auckland Grammar. But there were a few teams like that in the 1B that were, like even McLean's, Tamaki, they all could have, beaten teams like Liston and Aotearoa and Tangaroa College, because they're all around that same sort of level. St. Paul's next year are going to be a big team to watch, and I love the fact that they're getting their league boys ready in rugby first 15 in the 1A, and hopefully they can have that consistency and stay at their level up there, and know what it can do for the boys, because I feel like they're on the right path right now, and it's only going to be good for those boys and for their rugby league program. One quick thing that I wanted to talk about was the unlikelies, the unlikely top four. The unlikely top four, and I think everyone is expecting Hamilton Boys, Napier, Nelson, and Kelston to be the top 4. But let's say it wasn't. Like, let's say that Westlake win, New Plymouth Boys wins, Silverstream wins, and John McGlashan wins. What if that was like the top 4? Because like this year has like been pretty unpredictable, and all the teams have been pretty much around the same sort of level, and everyone's been beating each other. No one stayed unbeaten, and we have all the traditional teams that make it all the time. What if it wasn't this year? Like, would people still be interested in it? Like, would people still be interested if you saw Westlake and, you know, John McGlashan play against each other for the top 4, and Silverstream and New Plymouth Boys? I mean, they played already this year, New Plymouth Boys and Silverstream, because they have a traditional against each other. And then, you know, Westlake and John McGlashan will be a new one. But I mean, would it still be watchable by everybody? Would everyone still be interested in it? Having those kind of teams in there? Because I think most of the time we do just come for the traditionals. We do come for the big names, and I'm certainly kind of one of those guys too, where I feel like if you are the better team, you should just win. You should win because you're the better team. Upsets are great, and that's fine. But let's say that this week Westlake ended up winning, New Plymouth ended up winning, Silverstream ended up winning, and John McGlashan ended up winning. And I think the closest game is the Nelson and John McGlashan's probably the closest, you know, match game. And people don't know who John McGlashan is right now. But I mean, if you follow my page, you've obviously heard about them, because I talk about them quite a bit. And they haven't been beaten this year in terms of throughout the season. They just got beaten in the preseason, but that's not when I was counting, when that happened, that's not when I was counting them towards the rankings. But would that be more refreshing, I think, if we saw those kind of teams win? Like, what if Westlake ended up being the national championships, like champions for New Zealand? You know, what if it was St. Pat's Silverstream or John McGlashan or, you know, New Plymouth Boys, like having a new name up there? Is it just one of those things that's cool to think about, or is it something that we really want to see? Or are we okay with Napier Boys, Napier Boys or Kelston having it again, Hamilton Boys being there, Nelson, you know, getting one? Or was that kind of what we wanted to see? Or is that kind of what we're comfortable with seeing? Maybe it's comfortability. Maybe that's what we want to see is just having comfortability of these traditional teams winning it and taking it. Because there is a possibility that this all could happen, especially with the way that it's been going this year. And like, we're not too far off that kind of, you know, situation. So, you know, I would still watch it just because I'm so interested in players and teams and you know how things go. I would still watch it, but I don't know if the general public will be keen on something like that. And I mean, I don't know how Sky Sports would cover it. You know, like, I honestly don't think that they'll know that much about those other teams that are there. You know, like, they'll probably just go back on my page and start listening to and watching all the stuff that I get. I know that I give information to some of those guys too, because I like some of those guys at Sky, and I help them out just out of the goodness of my heart, and because I am comfortable with being, you know, talking with those guys. And so if that ever happened, it would be cool to watch. It would be cool for me because I just like that kind of stuff. But in general public, I don't know if the general public would like to see John McGlashan win the national title, or to see New Plymouth on top, or Silverstream on top, or Westlake on top. Maybe it'd just be a bit too different and unfamiliar. Let me know what you think anyway. And maybe I'll talk about it more later on, but let me know your thoughts. This is Herschel for High School Top 200. Later, Bob.